Hey folks, it's Joe Hiker here, and this is a video about how you actually go about planning an overnight hike on a trail near you. Now we should note at the outset that this is not a gear video. This video assumes that you've already figured all of that stuff out. You already know what you're going to want to bring. If you haven't and you're looking for advice on what do I bring with me out there on the trail on my first overnight hike, check out my video, What I Bring With Me on the Appalachian Trail below. It's also geared towards people who are doing an overnight hike for the first time. They don't have a lot of hiking experience, and that'll give you an overview of the kind of equipment that you're going to want to bring out with you. But once you've got that all squared away, come back and watch this video, because there are some things you need to think about in terms of planning that first overnight hike, what you're going to do on it, how you're going to get from point A to point B, how you're going to time things out, how you're going to find out where the trailhead is. I'll also tell you some things that I wish I had thought of the first time I went out on my first overnight hike. So stay tuned. There are a few important things that you're going to want to do sitting down at a computer, and the first is to check the weather. So I know that I'm going to go to Springer Mountain this weekend for an overnight hike, and I'm just going to type that into Google, and you should type in the location that is closest to where you're going to spend the night. And I can see when I click on Saturday that I am in for some precipitation, and I encourage you to go out on an overnight hike, even if it is raining, because you need to learn how to deal with those conditions. But if it's your first hike, maybe you should wait until there's good weather. Dealing with a lot of rain can be stressful, and if you don't have any experience out on an overnight hike, I might not recommend it, but I think eventually you should try to level up to be able to deal with those conditions. And you can see here that Google also gives you an hour-by-hour weather report. So you can see, and you want to look at this several days out to determine, am I comfortable with how the weather is shaping up, so that you don't, the night before, realize that there's actually intense thunderstorms and flash flood warnings, and you have to put the kibosh on your hike. So try to keep an eye on the weather a few days out at least. Really take advantage of this hour-by-hour estimate of temperature and precipitation to get a feel for what are the conditions going to be out in the field as your overnight hike evolves. Another thing you're going to want to do is look at the state park or national park website, and here I'm going to type in Chattahoochee National Forest and totally butcher the spelling, but they will have a website wherever you're going to hike usually. You can see this is put out by the USDA Forest Service. And you want to pay particular attention to the alerts and warnings. So it looks like there's nothing severe here, but if there are any trail closures, if there's any seasonal activity like animal activity or shutting down parts of the trail for maintenance, it will be here, and you should look at this so that you don't get out there and realize that the trail is actually closed, because you're not going to like that. And another thing that you should keep in mind is that you can look for parking, and so I'm going to go to passes and permits here, and if in the area that you're going you need a permit or you need to bring cash for parking in advance, be sure to look up those things before you actually get out there. The last thing we're going to do is actually look for directions, so I'm going to type in Three Forks Trailhead, because I know that that's actually on Google Maps, and you just want to try to get as close to where you know this trail is that you've decided to go to, and plug it into Google Maps. And the reason you want to do this is you really do want to get an estimate of when you need to leave, in terms of how long is it going to take you to get out of your door to the actual trailhead, because especially if it's your first overnight hike, you don't want to put a lot of time pressure on yourself and get out there at like 10 or 11 and feel like you're not going to be able to make it to where you want to be at the end of the day. So be sure to factor in your drive time, and I encourage you to send the directions to your phone so that that's one less thing you have to do the morning of. You can just open the notification on your phone and then you're good to go. Although I used to live in Florida and did some of the Florida Trail, Right now I go on overnight hikes on the Appalachian Trail in North Georgia, and the first place that every hike I've done up there begins is here with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy map. So you can go on Amazon and find these. They're awesome. I've never been let down by it. I look at it days before, I look at it while I'm out there in the field. It has everything marked. The trail itself, the trailheads, the roads that are around the trails, the shelters, the places where there's camping, the places where there's water. I tried to find maps online, but none of them were as detailed or as convenient or as easy to use as this is. So I highly recommend this. Now, if you can't find an Appalachian Trail Conservancy map because you're not doing the Appalachian Trail, I still encourage you to go online and look and see if you can find some kind of map for the particular trail that you're doing. Chances are, if you're doing a trail that is part of public land, that there is some kind of state entity that is going to make a map for it, and you can check that out. And it's really good to just visualize what you're getting into, where you're going, what are the locations on the trail, where are the camping sites, where are the water sites, and a good trail map, whoever makes it, is going to have those things for you.
This is an up-close look of the map put out by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, and you can see just how incredibly detailed it is. It has all of the parking spots marked where you can park your car in order to get on the trail. So each of these parking areas are at a particular trailhead. So a note about parking: you need to go on the website for the state forest or the national forest where you're going to hike and see what their policy is for parking. If you can leave your car overnight, if there's a fee. Up in North Georgia, where I hike, you can just leave your car for free at any one of these parking areas, unless there's, unless it's marked otherwise. So that's pretty awesome. You're going to want to get your parking situation sorted out unless you have somebody who's nice enough to drive you, drop you off, and then pick you up. But most of the time, people understand that you're going to want to camp or go on an overnight hike, so they'll let you keep your car out there. And I've never had any problem with my car being vandalized or anything. Most of the people that I meet on the trail are really, really nice. Everybody's just out there to have a good time. So this particular map also gives you locations where you might want to take a picture, particularly scenic locations. It gives you the designated campsites, and it also tells you where the shelters are and where the water sources are. So this is just the kind of stuff you want to be looking for. And if you're not doing the AT, I remember when I was doing the Florida Trail, I could find ArcGIS maps that would have similar stuff of the Florida Trail online for free, and I used those many times to plan out overnight hikes. What I like to do when I'm planning this out is to find a parking area and then to find a campsite. So I'm going to start at the parking area, park my car, and then I'm going to go along the section of the trail to get to the campsite. And on the Appalachian Trail map, you can see here that it has the elevation for every section, and it also has the distance on the bottom here. So if you find a particular section that you want to do on the map, you can then come down to the elevation and see, okay, well, how hard of a hike is that going to be in terms of the elevation? And then at the very bottom, you can see the distance. So let's say if I want to go from here, Indian Grave Gap, all the way over here to Poplar Stamp Gap. Well, I would go down to my map and find Indian Grave Gap, which is at, let's just say, mile 56, and then I would go find Poplar Stamp Gap, which is at mile 45. I'm not very good at math, but you get the idea. You're going to want to find somewhere where you can park and then somewhere where you can camp to reach. Okay? And then you're going to just want to make sure that there's enough distance between those that you feel comfortable. And then once you get there, you're going to set up camp, and then you're just going to walk back to where you parked your car the next day, get in your car, and then go home. Probably the only other thing you need to be aware of is just where the water is. And I find that usually there are more locations that have water than are represented on the map. But ideally, wherever you choose to camp at the end of your day of hiking would also have a water supply, because you're going to need a lot of water. I'm going to make a separate video about how much water do you need to bring. But even if you carry a lot of water, you're still going to need to resupply if you're drinking enough water and you're using water when you get to your camp to make food. So one additional criterion for selecting the campsite that you want to go to from the parking spot, the trailhead, is making sure that there's some water either at the campsite or, no more than a mile away from it so that you can resupply.
The reason it's important to have a map is that I have never done an overnight hike where I have not had some idea of how much distance I'm going to try to cover, where I'm going to make camp, where the water is. And without knowing things like that, you might get into some major inconveniences. So you don't want to just go out and just hike until you feel tired and not really have a plan of where you're going to make your camp, not really know where the sources of water are. So in order to avoid those kinds of logistical problems, you really want to think of, okay, based on my fitness, based on what I want to do while I'm hiking, if I want to hike all day, if I want to hike part of the day, you need to plan that out and figure out, okay, well, how many total miles am I going to go, especially if you're doing a trail like the Appalachian Trail where it goes on for more than 1,000 miles and you're not going to do all of that in one day. So you need a distance that you can cover in a day that you feel good about, that fits into the other things that you want to do on the trail. If you want to do stuff in camp, if you want to take video, if you're bringing other people with you, maybe small children or something, you're sharing your first overnight hike with them and you know that they're not going to want to go 15, 20 miles in one day. You really need to get that distance nailed down. And if you're going with other people, don't assume that they're going to want to go the same distance that you are. You need to be on the same page so that you don't have an idea in your head of where you're going to set up camp. And then the other people with you, they only want to go half that distance, but there's no actual good place to camp halfway through what you had planned. So then you're in a bit of a pickle. So try to avoid all of that. Get a map. Get it really nailed down what your itinerary basically is on the trail for day one, where you're going to set up camp on that first night, and then what you're going to do coming back, which is usually just the reverse of what you did the first day. Another thing that I really wish that I had thought of the first time I went on an overnight hike on the Florida Trail is how much time is it going to take to get out of the door in the morning, get all of my stuff together, eat breakfast, go through my mental checklist of did I forget anything, and actually leave my door and get to the trailhead. Because I remember on my first overnight hike, I got there at like 11, and all through the day I was concerned, like, oh boy, well, I had planned this out so that I needed to cover a certain amount of distance. I thought I was going to get here a lot earlier, so by the time the sun goes down, am I even going to make it to my campsite? So that's not a good feeling. You don't really want to put that stress on yourself. So just make sure you plan out how much time do I need to allow myself in the morning, driving time, to get from my front door to the trailhead, and make sure that you get up early enough so that you can get everything done in order to leave on time, okay? The most important thing that you can do, the most important part of this video, before you go on your first overnight hike, give the location, the name of the location, the address to someone that you trust, okay? Whether it's your girlfriend, your wife, your boyfriend, your husband, your mom or your dad, so that if something happens, if you don't get back on time, that they know where you set out. And if it is a trail that has a north and a southbound direction, or an east and a westbound direction, you want to give them some sense of what landmark are you going toward from the trailhead. So when I'm going out this weekend, I'm going to go on an overnight hike on the Appalachian Trail, and I'm going to start out at Three Forks Gap, and I'm going to go to the top of Springer Mountain. So if something happens to me, I'm going to tell my wife where I'm going, and they'll know that I'm heading towards Springer Mountain from Three Forks Gap, and that they're going to have to recover my body somewhere along that trail. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. So there you have it, folks, a list of things that you can do to make your first overnight hike a success. And as with many things, the phrase prior preparation prevents poor performance holds true with hiking, overnight hiking. So make sure you take these things into account. Make sure you give the location information of where you're going to somebody that you trust, and really enjoy yourself. Have a great time. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And thanks for watching.